Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is episode number 83. I'm your host, Scotty, and today we are talking about Inter Miami's new coach. And in order to do that, I brought along our co-host, Saur. How are you feeling tonight, my man?
Dude, you're on a different wavelength. You're on a much more positive, optimistic wavelength than I am. I'm a little bit more downbeat compared to you. I've had a long week and it's only Monday, so I don't know what to say. I'm gonna try and pick up the energy over the next hour or so. But I'm doing fine, man. How are you?
I'm feeling fine. I think there's probably going to be a very interesting conversation to be had. The vast majority of this episode is going to be designated to Javier Mascherano, who is going to be Inter Miami's new coach. And we're going to talk about it from all different directions. And I think just based on the 5 minutes we talked about this beforehand, we're going to have not disagreements, but sort of coming at this from different scopes. And I think that'll be interesting to have this conversation and get some ideas out on the table. We haven't talked since news broke that Mascherano is going to be the new Inter Miami coach. And so this is our first time really getting our thoughts out. And I am interested to hear what you have to say. But before that, there is a little bit of news that we need to get to. And that is that Inter Miami, as reported by footy headlines or football headlines, is going to have another third kit next year. They've already reported that Inter Miami is going to have a new home kit next year, a new away kit, as is natural. And so 3 new kits next year. The archive is going in the archive. The togetherness kit is going out the window. And of course, La Noche, which has been around for 2 years now, is going to get cycled out. Third kit, if you see on screen, this is what the color is supposed to look like. It's sort of a bluish color, not as much of a teal as this year's was. The article said it might be a little more similar to what Argentina has. I'm not sure if that's the case. They didn't have any sort of rendering yet, but that is the report. 3 new kits next year. How are you feeling about it?
That's a lot of new kits. I don't know if I have the money to buy all of them, but I'll definitely pick up the one that's the most promising and looks good. I don't know if I want to go with the NYCFC blue. That's a horrid blue. And as we all know, I don't like NYCFC in this podcast. So I don't know if I'll go with the third kit. Maybe the away kit's going to be nice. Maybe it's a black one. I don't know. We'll see. I'll wait and see how it actually pans out. And Adidas is not known to produce too many original kits. So I'll be interested to see what they do with the Inter Miami kits, because that's definitely going to be one of their top sellers. But I'll reserve my judgment for when they release it. And yeah, Inter Miami having 3 new kits is obviously, commercially viable for this club. So good for us.
I actually just stumbled upon a realization, but in the 2023 season, we, for one game for the Earth Day special game, we wore sort of a teal kit. Fast forward a year, our third kit is teal. This year, we didn't actually wear it in a game, but we did have an Earth Day themed pregame kit that is sort of this color. And I wonder if that's sort of serving as the inspiration for this third kit. I just stumbled across that, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing. Maybe we'll get a preview of what our next kit for the following year will look like on Earth Day this year. But yeah, I'm excited. I think kits are fun.
Yeah, kits are so fun.
I also don't love the togetherness kit, and the archive kits are cool. I'd be happy if they wore them again once or twice next year, but I like having new kits rotated in.
As I was going to say, Adidas doesn't have the best record of producing good kits every year. They seem to recycle across a lot of different teams that they sponsor. Yeah. So I'll be very interested to see how they play these 3 out, because obviously they got 3 new kits that they need to upgrade. I really like the archive kits, man. They were pretty cool, and we didn't have the best record in them, I think. So I hope that this time around when we have our third kit, I hope that we have a better record in that. But yeah, I love kits, man. I absolutely love seeing the launch of new kits. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, not that my opinion matters at all, but my hot take for kits is that they should mix and match the shorts a little more often.
Yeah.
I think pink on black, like the black shorts, but for a pink top, or maybe even white shorts, white socks with the pink top for a day game. I think that would look really cool. They never do that, and I think that's kind of sad. because I think you can get more uniform combos with the same outfits. Any other kit hot takes, or should we get into who Inter Miami's new coach is going to be?
No, I had a talking point in this, but I forgot, so we should probably move on.
I'm going to give you 2 seconds to remember. Okay, time's up. Let's get to Javier Mascherano. And I hope I am saying his name right. I tried to look it up today. I guess if you are from Spain, it's Mascherano, and you sort of accentuate the C. And if you're from Argentina, it's Mascherano. He's from Argentina, so I'm assuming it's Mascherano. But if anyone wants to correct us in the comment section, I would really appreciate that. On screen, I have his resume, which is a struggle to make one full list. He has only ever coached in the Argentine youth ranks. He was the under-20s coach for a couple years, and then he was the Olympic qualifying and Olympic coach for this Olympic cycle, which means that he's coached at the U20 and U23 level. He's never coached at the club level. He's never coached at the professional level. He's never coached at the senior men's national team level, not even as an assistant. And so this is certainly something. I'll just go through his resume real quick. When he first took over the U20s, he did win a friendly tournament, the Alcudia tournament, for whatever that's worth. But at the next tournament that he went to, he was eliminated in the group stage. At the South American Games, he was eliminated in the group stage. In under 20 World Cup qualifying, they failed to qualify. They ended up lucking into that tournament because there was hosting rights went to Indonesia, but because of some political issues, they got moved to Argentina. So Argentina got to qualify as a host after they failed to qualify through normal qualifying. And then they were eliminated in the round of 16 in that tournament. He gets the job as the Olympic coach, and he gets them into the Olympics. We'll remember that I think Paraguay and Diego Gomez earlier this year at the Pre-Olympico tournament beat Argentina in the final. And then in the Olympics, they were eliminated in the first round of the knockout stages in the quarterfinals against France, I believe. So, and that's it. I mean, it's been a couple years of coaching. He's very young. He's in his early 40s. I think he might just be 40. He obviously has a long history as a player. For anyone that followed him anyone that followed Barcelona for a long time, you'll obviously be very familiar with him. Played in Argentina, played in Brazil, played in England, played in China, and then obviously played in Spain with Barcelona. There's not much to it, man. There's not much to it.
Well, you know what the flavor is, right? Bold is best. If Pep Guardiola is such a genius of a coach, we also have our own bold coach with Mascherano coming in. Thank you for putting me back on screen. Quick question. Has he been announced officially?
He has not been announced officially, but everyone from all of the South American reporters to even Fabrizio Romano in Europe has already sort of said this is happening. This broke Friday morning when Tata Martino still hadn't had his press conference yet. So I'm assuming we're going to get it, tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. But first thoughts, I'm a little underwhelmed. You know how you mentioned the last podcast that we did that I was not as optimistic about Tata Martino leaving as I was the previous week. And my answer to you was my mood would depend on who we replace him with. Because the more I think about it, the more it seems that there aren't that many obvious replacements for Tata Martino. So that being said, the field of play was very limited and the names that were being thrown about weren't that promising. And now that this has almost been made official, I'm not sure, man. It's fairly underwhelming. I will obviously get behind my coach. I will get behind my team regardless of who it is, and I will give him a chance for sure. But when you look at the track record that he has, when you look at his background, his CV, and his profile, it doesn't fill you with too much confidence, does it?
Here's what I'll say. I'm not going back on Tata Martino. I'm not someone who thinks that we would be better off with Tata Martino. I like the fact that they're saying Tata wasn't good enough and we need to go hire someone that we think can get us further. I'm also not going to hold his record against him because it's not a record. I just think he's never coached before. He's never coached at a club. He's never even been an assistant in a club. So to me, he has no track record that I'm interested in. Being a national team coach is so difficult because you get such little time with these players, but it's even further exasperated because you're a youth team coach. You only have a few players that are coming in for every single camp because they have to be released by their clubs because players are developing at different rates at that age. And so guys may take huge jumps or fall back or fail to progress. And it's hard to predict those types of things. So I'm almost disregarding his entire coaching career because it's A, unimpressive. And maybe if it was more impressive, I would give it more credence. But B, it's so short and so lacking in depth that I'm almost like, this is just hiring Mascherano after he retired. So I am nervous about that. But at the same time, I think there's a reason they picked this guy. They clearly talked to him. They clearly think he's a smart guy. The players on the team that have played with him clearly think highly of him enough to feel like this is a good direction to go. Certainly Messi and Busquets. Certainly Messi would have had some input on this coach rather. And so to me, I think it's very dangerous to hire someone with such a lack of experience, but I don't want to hold what seems like failure on his resume against him because I don't know how much it actually translates.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to delve deeper into the experience aspect of it and how much he's suited to coaching this team. But I think there's definitely a case to be made of the fact that he doesn't have that resume and how high stakes the season actually is. What was the decision making that went behind this appointment, right? And I think you trust the backroom staff, the administration, the executives to make that right decision. And you said it, they must have seen something in him to appoint him and put him in charge of such an important team. Because let's be honest, we are on a ticking time bomb, right? We don't have that much time for this Inter Miami team to capitalize on its superstars and win the cups and the trophies that we've basically been promised and basically being inspired to achieve. So the fact that he's been put in charge, they must have seen something in him. So regardless, we can have a discussion about what we think about him on a personal level, but when he actually gets announced officially, when he takes the field and when he takes the bench for the first game, I'm going to be fully behind him. And unless he changes my mind, I'm going to give him the benefit of doubt.
Okay, let's run through some pros just to get them out there. Obviously, a lot of people in the chat aren't happy with this. I think a lot of the reaction from Inter Miami's fan base was not excitement, I think is a fair way to put it. He's played at the highest level and he's been around sort of the highest levels of football thought at Barcelona, at Liverpool. He has experienced everything in this game, even though it was as a player. That is a positive, I think.
No, 100%. And there's a case to be made about players of his ilk. He seems to be an intelligent player. He's been around the world and he's well-traveled, seen different systems, seen different cultures. So players like him, and I don't know how to describe when I say like him, it just seems like he's an intelligent footballer, or he was an intelligent footballer in his prime. So I do hope that translates to an extent to his coaching ability. And you're absolutely right in saying that coaching at the youth level is not really the same, especially for an international team, as coaching at a club level. And his record shouldn't be held against him because it just doesn't match up, right? You can't necessarily do much with a youth team in terms of showing how capable you are in your tactics and your ability to coach a team properly. So yeah, there's a case to be made about he does have that footballing IQ, and I hope that translates in this role.
Well, I didn't say football IQ. I said he had experience in all the moments of soccer.
I said football IQ.
Hopefully he has a football IQ. Listen, I'm not a Barcelona fan. I've said this multiple times, so I don't know what it was like having him on the field. I never watched Barcelona on a weekly basis. So what he was as a player, I can only say from his resume. He did play a lot for the Argentine national team as well. He was a defender. You wonder if him being a center back adds importance in his head to the defensive side of the game. Obviously, they didn't do particularly well in tournaments, which would make you think he hasn't put a ton of focus in being a lockdown defensive team. But you would think that would help, and that is sort of where Inter Miami needs to bolster itself moving forward. They obviously have one of the best attacks in North America, but defensively, they're sort of average MLS team, and they need to be better if they want to win all the trophies that they want to win. I also think it's very good that he has a very intimate knowledge of the Argentine youth setup. He knows all of the players that are coming through. He has a relationship with all of the players coming through. He knows, and his coach, Federico Redondo, I'm sure he knows very well about Toto Aviles and Facundo Farias and potentially guys that Inter Miami might want to go after this winter or moving forward. That I think is a positive. And we've talked about Tata Martino's circle of our network of friends helping him identify players to bring in. I think you get that to an extent with Mascherano.
And it keeps a sense of continuity after Tata Martino as well. So it won't be a complete hard reset. And that's good. It's good for the youth players as well. And I want to add to your point that him being a younger coach allows him to associate well with some of our youth players, and him actually being around some of the younger players so much with his youth experience of coaching the Argentina youth team. I think that really helps and should actually help with our youth setup and some of the younger players that we have in the squad. And I hope that actually comes through.
Yeah, I think you said it right. Not because he's younger than Tata. I mean, he's 40, he's not 27, but because he's been working with young players for the last couple of years, he should be comfortable doing that. And Inter Miami has a nice young history of bringing players through the youth ranks and helping them blossom into the first team. And we talked about on our offseason list some of the guys that may come through next. And obviously, Santi Morales and Israel Boatwright, Tyler Hall, guys that haven't even gotten their chance yet. This is a coach that's sort of young and has worked with young players, and maybe will be able to help bring them through a little bit better. So I think that's also a positive. Anything else that you would consider a positive from this hire, just off the bat?
He has that Barcelona connection with the 4 superstar players that we have, the Barcelona 4, and that, again, is a big positive. I just feel like we may be shifting too much towards the Barcelona-Argentina nexus, and I don't know how sustainable that is in the long term, but at least in the short term, his adjustment period is going to be a lot easier because he's familiar with some of the players. As you mentioned, Redondo, he would know Aviles, he would know Facundo Farias, but he's also really close friends with Messi, Jordi Alba, Sergio Busquets. So at least in terms of the initial adjustment, players are going to take on board whatever he says, and there's going to be a sense of authority that he's going to come in with because he has the Messi stamp of approval and that connection with the Barcelona boys. So that, I think, in a way is a positive. I can spin that off as a negative as well, but I'm sure we're going to get into that. But I think for now, we just say it's a positive.
Yeah, that was my last positive, is clearly Messi, and not just Messi, but Busquets, Alba, Suarez, maybe Neymar or something. You know, if there's anybody else that comes in, Di Maria also would have known him from the national team. They will have a relationship with him that you would assume is very positive. So those to me are all the positives. I don't personally want to be very negative about this hire yet, because even though, listen, if Inter Miami hired Greg Berhalter, I would be incredibly annoyed and be Berhalter out from the beginning. But that's because I've watched Berhalter week in and week out for a long time. So any fans that have watched the Argentine youth teams that feel that way, I get it. I'm not there because I haven't seen it with my own eyes. So I don't want to be super negative, but you're also coming at this from a more critical angle. So I want to let you take over for all the negatives before we get into some of our sort of overall questions that we want to get to.
So I think the first one, and the obvious elephant in the room, is the biggest question about his experience. You've listed out his resume. You've mentioned the things that he's done in his very short-lived youth career of coaching the Argentina youth team. He hasn't been very successful in tournaments. Whatever reason for that, not too sure. Haven't followed him very closely, but just the lack of experience, and not just a lack of experience in the MLS, which in itself is a talking point, but lack of experience coaching teams is going to be a big factor and a very, very dangerous move, because there's obviously one thing to be coaching a team like Inter Miami, which has eyes from all around the world on it. The scrutiny is going to be intense. He's going to have to hit the ground running from the very start. And his value as a coach is going to be judged by how well he's able to maintain and sustain this team, performing at the same level as Tata Martino, and then even better because the expectations for the next season are much higher. So he's coming in with a lot of scrutiny, a lot of pressure, and he hasn't coached that much. So I'm not sure how he's going to be able to deal with that pressure. And then there's another question about his tactics, his ability to coach so many players who are very much the center of attention on this team, and then integrate the youth in it. A lot of questions about the coaching come to fore when it's about the negatives. So I'm not really sure how his experience is going to play out over the next couple of months.
Well, then let's get into that, because I guess my question is, does experience matter? And more specifically, does it matter in MLS? Because I oftentimes hear that it's very difficult to get used to this league, and having experience in the MLS is such a huge benefit. I don't know how much I've actually seen that play out with Inter Miami, but Inter Miami's only had 5 seasons, right? Maybe if you're a Galaxy fan, you feel this much more intimately. Does it actually matter? That's my
So
first
I
question.
made a statement saying that when you're coaching this Inter Miami team, all you need to do is put the right players on the pitch and then let it play out. Right? We've talked about this at the start of last season. We mentioned that all the coach has to do is actually get the team selection right and then let the talent shine through. I think I want to walk back a little bit on that statement because it's not as simple as it sounds. There's a lot more that goes on around, especially when it comes to the MLS. So there are 2 questions within your main question, right? First is whether this Inter Miami team needs an experienced coach. 100%. We've seen last season that despite Tata Martino's great experience, this team has certain areas where it's very unrefined, areas that it needs to work on: its defense, its defensive transitions, its ability to sometimes compose and control the games, because we lacked that when we didn't have the right profile players a la Busquets in there. So there is a level of inexperience, there is a level of immaturity in this team that needs to be coached, that needs to be improved, that needs to be taken up to that next level. There are players that are up and coming that need to be developed further. There are some very promising players on this team, like Noah Allen, like Yannick Bright, like Toto Aviles, who I want to see take that next step in the next season, just because they're on that upward trajectory. So with all of this in mind, you need to have a coach who has an idea of how he wants to approach this and has a sense of experience of dealing with improving teams. And Mascherano hasn't really proven that thus far. So the question of whether this Inter Miami team needs an experienced coach, I think yes. I want to get your thoughts on that first, and then we can move on to the next question about whether we need a coach who has the MLS experience.
Well, to me, there's 2 factors to this. One, what you mentioned in terms of developing a team is tough, because the guys that are proven at that are at better places than Inter Miami. So that like a guy that is done that and is proven to be successful at that is going to be very difficult to get to this club.
Would
And
you
so
say
you're
would you say Tata Martino succeeded in doing that a little bit?
I think he succeeded in it, but I don't think that was why we brought him in. And I don't think that was something that was part of why we brought him in. I don't think he has a great history of bringing young players through. So the fact that he did when he got here, I guess, is my point. Do they think he has the tools to do that is different than has he a demonstrated ability to do it? Because again, the coaches that are really good at developing young players and have a track record that we would find on their Wikipedia page are few and far between, and they're getting paid a lot of money to coach at very high levels. I don't know how likely we were to get a coach like that. And so to me, it's, do they think he has the personality and the chops to do that? And this will be where he proves that he can do that. That's one part of it. As far as the MLS, to me, it's not that. It's different, because that I think is a general coaching thing, and whether he has that or not, we'll find out. But and I think that's part of why they hired him, is because he worked with the young players. I don't know what success levels he had there, or how the people in Argentina that are sort of intimately familiar with the federation feel he did with development. Maybe they feel really good about it. But for me in the MLS, it's about the travel is really the hardest thing, and
The
keeping
away
players healthy.
games.
It's the away games. When you're in Spain, when you're in England, you take a 3-hour train ride, and that's the farthest trip you have. Or maybe you take a 1-hour plane trip, and that's the farthest trip you have. In the MLS, that is the shortest trip, right? It's 2-hour flight to Atlanta. I guess Orlando City's closer, but and Atlanta's the second closest team. So when you're talking about managing week in and week out trips across the country, that I think is where the MLS experience comes in handy. And it makes me nervous that not only does the coach not have that, but not a lot of people in the front office are going to have that very soon. And that's a talking point we'll get to in a little bit. But for me, it's the travel and the keeping guys rested and healthy throughout multiple games, because we're going to be in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We're going to go do the Club World Cup. Who knows what's going to happen with the Open Cup? And then obviously the MLS, which is going to be as busy as ever. And I imagine Inter Miami is going to get scheduled against San Diego FC at some point, just to get San Diego sort of a boost in their first year. So, cross-country trips to LA and San Diego are probably on the table this year. That to me is where I'm a little nervous. And we saw this year, Messi sat out games when he was, probably healthy enough to go if he had to. They sat him at Vancouver and, on certain road trips to keep him healthy.
Yeah, and I think it's also, just to add on to what you said, it's the Juju MLS games, right? The one MLS result that you'll always get. And Inter Miami tended to have few and far between. I think I can count on my one hand the results where you're like, yeah, this is an MLS result against St. Louis. We should be winning this by 5-0, and we've just drawn with them 3-3. So there are going to be those results. And away games, not just for the travel, it's a different beast, man. It's hard to explain unless you actually watch it from day to day. And those away games take a lot of toll on you, and you have to be mentally prepared to be able to deal with that. And at least for the first half of the season, I expect a little bit of an adjustment period for the coaching staff, because it's going to take time for them to adjust to that away travel schedule, but also performing in an away stadium with that level of away crowd on you and the eyes that are on into Miami. And again, I don't want to keep comparing to the previous season, but that is the benchmark that we've set. So our away record last season was very, very good. And if we need to, of course, perform this season, I think we have to sustain that level of away records.
Yeah, so maybe we should get into sort of what the expectations are for Mascherano, because you have this world where Inter Miami is coming off of winning the Supporter Shield, breaking the points record, and they have to do better next year than that, which was by almost any metric a great season. But Mascherano doesn't have the sort of coaching experience or resume to make you think he's going to do that. But I'm worried about the expectation changing because of that. And that's my biggest thing, is you can't let the expectation change. You have to continue, maybe you don't have to win the Supporter Shield next year or this points record, but that was sort of not something Inter Miami was dying for at the beginning of this year. It's having a more successful season, getting 2, 3, 4 trophies. And that's what they want to do, is win 4 trophies, be competitive for 4 trophies or more, right? That has to continue to be the expectation for Inter Miami, even under Mascherano, who doesn't have the experience to tell you that he's worth that. And that to me is a concern, because he doesn't have that, but you can't lower your expectations because he doesn't have that.
No way at all. This is not a adjustment period. This is not a alteration to our normal course. This is a moving forward. This is a, dare I say, an upgrade. Yes, Tata Martino moved on for whatever reason, whether it was his personal choice, whether the club asked him to leave. We won't ever know that. But whatever said and done, this appointment of Mascherano for this club at this point in time is on paper considered a move forward, right? In doing that, the club is essentially saying, and I think Jorge Mas said that in his press conference as well, they want to continue to challenge at that same level. He needs to hit the ground running. This is not an alteration. There's no adjustment period in between. With the way Inter Miami has performed, we need to make sure that we get up to that next level of getting those trophies that we were promised, getting to those finals that we think we should be in, because this roster is so good and well constructed. And just because of that, the expectations on Mascherano, regardless of his experience, regardless of where he's been before, cannot alter. It has to stay the same.
Yeah, just going back to our MLS conversation, Steve asks, are his assistant coaches going to be the same as what Tata had? And I would be shocked if any of Tata's assistants stay, except for Javier Morales, who was already with Inter Miami. Those are Tata's guys, and they're going to go with Tata to Tata's next job as well. And you don't want them leaving in the middle of the next year when Tata gets a new job doing something else. So I think they're going to be gone. I think Mascherano is going to get, bring 2 or 3 guys with him. It'll be interesting to see if any of those guys have a connection to Messi or not, or if they'll be Mascherano's guys, because I doubt he has sort of a long tree of assistant coaches that he's going to pick from. But yeah, as far as the the standard, I think that's the best way to say it. The standard for Inter Miami has to stay the same. Win 4 trophies. That's the expectation. That's how they're charging for ticket prices. That's what they're talking about publicly. That has to be the expectation for fans. And you can't lower that because Mascherano doesn't have that on his resume. He understands as he takes this job that those are the requirements. He's accepting those expectations. And so, and Inter Miami looked at this guy and said he can hit those expectations. So both the club and the coach have said, we agree to this. And so fans should not hold him to any smaller expectations just because he doesn't have the resume. I think that's the biggest point that I wanted to get across is nothing changes.
Yep, 100%. This is just a change in the coaching staff. This is not a deviation from our original plan or strategy of winning those 4 trophies.
Okay, so one of the things Tata did do well, and you mentioned it, was winning on the road. He also did very well without, Messi on the pitch. Something that maybe we didn't love from him in year 1, but in year 2, his first full season, he got a lot out of this team without Messi on the pitch. But it feels like one of the reasons Mascherano's coming is because Messi approved of him. And it also feels like he's going to rely on Messi and Busquets and Alba and Suarez for some tactical deployments this season. So what does this look like if Messi's not there helping to, being sort of an assistant coach and developing a strategy that works, because he's going to miss games next year.
Yeah, and this could have been a talking point for any incoming coach, honestly. I think there's definitely something to be said about this Inter Miami team with Messi and without Messi. There have been many instances in the past season where Messi basically bailed us out with his performances. We outperformed our XG on a large scale in a lot of the games. And having him is definitely an asset that Javier Mascherano is going to rely on. He is going to make sure that he gets the best out of Messi, Suarez, Busquets, and Alba, because those are his boys. And at the end of the day, that is going to be the core that he's going to utilize. But I think the biggest pitfall or signpost to judge him by is going to be how well he's able to deal with the pressure of not having players like Messi. Messi may not be injured as much as last season, but he is going to be unavailable at times when he goes for international duty. There are going to be injuries to the squad regardless. I know we all want a completely injury-free Messi or the rest of the squad as well, but we are going to get injuries. And when that happens, how does he actually adapt to it? How does he change his style? When does he let go of his crutch that is Messi? And how well is he able to stand on his own 2 feet and be like, okay, now I have to perform without the biggest assets, without the big guns on my shoulder. How do I deal with that? How does he set the team up? What does he take back when it comes to setting the formation, relying on the youth players? So a lot of that is going to be big questions that we ask him and judge him by. And that's going to happen this season. And it's going to be, I think, the first and the biggest test that we're going to see of Mascherano as a coach.
Yeah. On the road at Vancouver, Inter Miami got a 2-1 victory on the road at Vancouver without Messi, Suarez, Busquets. Inter Miami got a 2-1 win against Columbus at home without Messi, Suarez, and Matias Rojas. There are going to be games like that, and those are the ones that are going to be the difference between winning the Supporter Shield and not. Getting home field advantage throughout the playoffs, which obviously didn't help us this time. But those things you want, you're going to have to win those types of games where you're down a key player, you're on the road, you've had 3 games in the last 10 days, and it's hard, but you have to rely on your depth, and you have to get sort of the strategy right, because as you get a little bit lower down in the depth and you're going against someone else's A team, you need to beat them with the coaches and not the coaching and the strategy, not the player talent as much. Should we just have the conversation? Because we've kind of been beating around the bush here.
Yeah.
We've been beating around the bush. This is Messi's friend, and he got the job because he's Messi's friend. And we can't ignore that. How should Inter Miami fans feel about this? Because Tata Martino had a great resume on paper. And yes, he had the connection to Messi, which was cool, but he was a real coach who had won an MLS Cup, right? So this guy who hasn't coached, like I'm just saying he's not a coach because he hasn't coached at a club yet, not even as an assistant. So he's just not a coach in my head. He's now our coach because he's Messi's friend. How should I think about this? Because I want to support him. He's a new coach. And again, I think he might be very positive. He's had a great career as a player. And so maybe he's a burgeoning superstar in the coaching profession. But that doesn't change the fact that he's Messi's friend. And that's why he got the job.
We're Inter Miami fans. And I think since we have this platform and we discuss Inter Miami, it would be a disservice to talk about this, right? We need to talk about this. It would be a disservice not to talk about it. This is a massive elephant in the room. And for all we know, to his credit, Mascherano is probably going to turn out to be a fantastic coach, has great pedigree, and is able to actually perform the way we want him to. But at this point in time, you're absolutely right. At least me as an Inter Miami fan, I don't want to talk about everybody else, but it doesn't fill me with too much confidence having somebody's friend come in to essentially take the coaching job of one of the biggest teams in the MLS. And I'm not sure how it's going to play out, because what happens when we don't get a couple of good results in our favor? What happens when we go on a losing streak? How do the players who are not Messi, Suarez, Alba, and Busquets, who are not his friends, how do they respond to him, right? Does that create a sense of doubt when you're players like Toto Aviles, Yannick Bright, Drake Callender? You're like, dude, okay, we brought this coach in because we thought he had some experience. We thought he was going to be good. And then now that we've lost 5 games on the trot, how's that going to play out? How's he going to react? So bringing in that friend coach I don't know if that's the recipe for success, because it creates a very bad precedence for the rest of the club. And I'm not sure how best to frame it at this point in time, but it doesn't leave the best taste in my mouth, at least. I have a lot of doubts about it. And I don't know if he can set aside the professional and the personal and how it affects the team dynamics. I think that's going to be a very, very important talking point throughout the season.
Well, and we talked about how the standard doesn't change. And so if it works, nothing changes. Like it's the same as if it was Tata or if it was Wilfred Nancy or Jim Curtin. But if it goes wrong, it's so much worse.
Much worse.
If it fails, it's so much worse. And we have to be open about this and acknowledge it. This isn't just a decision Inter Miami made to hire this guy because they thought he was the best candidate for the job and they want to build a project. It's not like most coaching jobs. And so if it doesn't work, you have to hold them accountable for the fact that they picked a guy because he was Messi's friend or he was part of this, circle of former Barcelona players. And I know that Raul Sanyehi and I know that Jorge Mas said that they did some analytical research or whatever.
They use AI to determine the best candidate. I would love
whatever nonsense they said. Yeah, whatever nonsense they said. This is a guy that they watched our stream and they said, when we asked, okay, who do we want to be the next coach? And they just looked at the names. I mean, they just looked at the most obvious names and went with one of them. And even beyond that, they probably were trying to bring this guy in beforehand. So they're bringing him in because they think it's good for their relationship with Messi, and whether Messi was directly responsible for it or how responsible he was for it, we don't know for sure. But all of that to say, they didn't do an exhaustive search for the very best coach to coach this team. And so if it goes wrong, they have to be responsible for that. And we have to call them out for it.
Yeah, and the evidence is right there. You said it yourself. They did not do an exhaustive search, because if they had done an exhaustive search of who the best coach available out there is, Mascherano would not be on anybody's list, right? He's on that list because it's comfortable for Messi and it's a recommendation for Messi. Now, again, for all we know, this goes completely fine. Everything is great. He turns out to be a fantastic coach and actually takes Inter Miami to the glory land that we are actually looking forward to going to. But if this goes bad, there's just so much negativity that can come out of it. And we constantly talk about culture of a football club, right? Let's assume if this was not Lionel Messi, if this was somebody else, a big name player, and they bring in somebody who's really good friends with that big name superstar player, I'm not sure if it's good for the culture to have a coach who is unable to find that balance between personal and professional, especially a coach who doesn't have any resume to back him, right? Like Xavi came into Barcelona, and not many people batted an eye because he did have coaching experience wherever. I think he was in Qatar, so he did have that level of coaching experience. If Xavi came in to Inter Miami, this would not have been the same talking point because he's proven himself. He's won the La Liga. He's been at Barcelona. He has that level of experience. But now Mascherano comes in. There's no basis of foundation for his experience and career right now. So the only thing to fall back on is he got this job because he's a friend of Messi. And I can totally imagine Taylor Twellman going off on commentary if we're losing a game and being like, okay, what does Javier Mascherano bring to this table? So a lot of questions to be asked, and I'm not sure how it influences the club culture.
Yeah. This is a big bet from the ownership to bet it all on Messi world. And, going even beyond Javier Mascherano and adding in Raul Sanllehi to be the new director of football or sporting director, whatever his official title is. And we think Chris Henderson's going to leave soon. You're basically taking out all of the MLS experience and you're saying, but we're all in on this Barcelona world. And if you do that, even though it doesn't necessarily seem like a good idea, you better be right about it. And if Mascherano if Mascherano and Sanllehi don't manage the roster rules right, they leave us lacking for depth next year compared to what we have this season because they paid some guy too much or they activated Chelo Wigan to be the backup, but then he's on too high of a wage. And like, there's so many ways this can go wrong that if it goes wrong, you have to just look in the mirror and say, you guys did this to yourselves.
Just think of it this
as the
way,
fans,
right?
we're going to have to suffer for it.
Yeah, and think of it this way. It's like a Jenga tower. If you and I were players for Inter Miami and we were in that dressing room, if everything's going great, we're like, okay, fantastic, great coach coming in, knows what he's doing, getting the results. The moment things start to go wrong, right? You have it at the back of your mind that this coach came in because Lionel Messi wanted him to be the coach of this Inter Miami team. When things don't go right, you don't just blame Javier Mascherano, you then blame Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
You then blame the so-called Barcelona boys because you're like, he came in because of your influence and this has turned out to be a disaster. I'm not playing because he's your best friend and he's the coach. And basically, if you don't like me, I'm not like. Do you get the amount of negativity and the culture that this can create for players who don't get the right game time? It can leave such a sour taste in their mouth.
And I do think the players have a little bit of sort of respect for Messi that they're okay playing less.
Yes.
Deference. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. So I'm not so much worried about the players. I'm worried about the fans, right?
Yeah.
Think about how many times we yelled about Tata Martino this year. Next season, if Mascherano's making mistakes, like we're going to know that Messi is a part of the game plan. Messi was a part of the tactical decision making. Messi was a part of the reason why this coach is here. And so I just don't want this to go bad and then people start hating Messi for it, because that's where you've put yourselves and you didn't have to do this. And it just, you could see how this could go wrong. And I think that's very risky. I think it's very risky. And, if this next season doesn't go the way we want, if it's worse than it was this season, like, people are going to have a sour taste in their mouth about this whole experience. And the highs were fun, but if it ends poorly and players don't want to re-sign, and it just feels very risky. And I think it would be a shame if we didn't mention that beforehand, so that if it goes wrong and we start yelling about it, we said that this was a possibility before they even officially hired him.
You just know a Saur IMCF rant is coming in, like, at least once this season. It's going to be coming. So you guys need to be prepared for that.
Let me just make sure we talked about everything. Yeah, and then again, along those same lines, going back to Sanyehi, he's bringing in players this offseason. Mascherano is going to bring in players this offseason. They're going to rework this roster, bring in new defenders, probably a new midfielder, maybe a left winger, maybe a right back. Right? They're going to fill some holes, maybe a goalkeeper. They have to make sure that they continue to have a roster as deep and talented as they had this year. I think it's going to be very difficult. And Jorge Mas put it on them to have a more talented roster next year. So I think it's going to be very difficult. And not having Chris Henderson in the building to manage that, it makes me very nervous. And so let's talk about how they're going to do this. I mentioned at the beginning, one of the biggest positives to Tata was his network of friends and circle of connections that helped him identify players in South America that would be talent for a cheap price. And it feels like we lost that, but we may have gotten a new sort of dynamic in this incredible Argentine youth experience.
Yeah, I think that's just been exacerbated a little bit. You mentioned that Tata Martino has the similar profile of Argentinian, all of that, and it's a continuity, right? So when you think about the off-season plans, I can almost say for a certainty that someone like Chelo Wigan is probably going to stay. He is going to look at that South American profile. Mascherano is going to look at players who is Spanish,
I disagree.
Argentinian. I have a very bad feeling that Chelo Wigan's going to sign on because he would want to rely on players who played for Inter Miami. He's a good locker room influence, and of course, Spanish speaking from that region, it helps.
So let me break it down before we get more into this conversation, and we can talk about specific players. Mascherano, played with Jordi Alba, Luis Suarez, Lionel Messi, Sergio Busquets. As a player, he was at Barcelona for 9-10 seasons, something like that. He'll know them very well. He was the coach for Federico Redondo and Toto Aviles at various points as a U20 and Olympic team coach. He also evaluated Benjamin Kramaski, who could be eligible for the Argentine national team. And I'm sure he evaluated Facundo Farias as well as part of his Olympic team responsibilities. So those are 8 guys that he should know pretty well. There are a couple of Argentines on the bubble of this roster that we're not sure about, but we would imagine he also has a little bit of knowledge of. Franco Negri and Chelo Wigan being those 2. Almost everyone else should be sort of a new player to this coach. And so we need to consider that. Okay. Tell me the first player you want to talk about.
I've already mentioned him, Chelo Wigan.
I don't think this means Chelo is definitely going to stay because he's never worked with Chelo.
I don't think it's a definite, but I do think there's a slightly higher chance. And I'll start with this, right? You're Javier Mascherano coming into the new club. The person who has your ear is Lionel Messi. He is going to be the first person to be like, listen, I think this right back who's from Argentina is very solid, plays well. I think he's a good locker room influence. Talk to the management, talk to Jorge Mas, talk to Chris Henderson till the time he's here. Let's see if they can keep him on because I really like him. So players who have that influence of Messi will obviously have that upper hand. And I think Chelo Wigan's definitely one of the players who, is influential in that back room.
Sean says Chelo goes unless it's a sign and re-sign to a lower deal for a longer time. I see. This is exactly what I'm talking about this Messi world thing, and not even just Messi, but the Barcelona world thing. If you see value in Chelo Wigan, I can see them just signing him and activating the buy-in and just signing him to this contract. And then all of a sudden, you no longer have room to go out and get a starter quality right back, or you're costing yourself space elsewhere. And then you have this contract on the books because Raul Sanyehi has never done this before. And because Mascherano has never done this before. And because, Messi has never done this before. I'm just worried that they're not going to have the Chris Henderson in their ear saying, guys, this is too much to spend on a player of this caliber. We could go find someone cheaper, because they don't have that experience with sort of salary caps and understanding where you need to put your resources and understanding how to build a team. They don't have that. And this feels like it could be a mistake if they go ahead and buy him. Now, if they do it and they sign him to a lower deal, okay, fine. But I couldn't see a year from now us saying, man, I wish we could get rid of Cello because he didn't have a great year, but he's on 700,000 a week. I'm sorry, 700,000 a year. And we can't get it off the books because nobody wants him. And we're stuck with him for the next 3 seasons. That feels like something that could happen. And it was because Mascherano and Sonny, he don't have the experience yet to be able to make this decision. So I'm worried about this Cello decision. I think it'll be very interesting to the insight.
Yeah, and as I said, I think the chances are higher. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think the chances are higher. And he's definitely one of those that we're keeping a close eye on, because I think he's going to tell you exactly how this window is going to play out. Because if you sign Cello to another deal, which is higher up, paying him more money, I'm not sure what's in store for the rest of the offseason. All right, let's move on to the next player.
Okay, Suri Christoph. Oh, I'm completely
I think he's gone, right?
Gone. Robert Taylor. I think he's gone.
Yeah. I'm not sure I don't know, man. You know how much I love Robert Taylor, but I don't think he's staying on. He's going to be one of those players that they're going to move on.
What about Franco Negri?
I think he's going to move on.
He's Argentine.
Yeah, but there's something to be said about having Noah Allen come up. And I don't know if
this is what I'm talking about, though. You can see someone saying, I just want him because he's an Argentine left back, and they're not using their roster and maximizing it in a way that's most effective. No, this is exactly the type of decision I'm talking about.
Yeah, that could definitely be the case. I don't think Franco Negri should stay on, but familiarity is the death of improvement, right? Or something like that. So just because Franco Negri is familiar, he's Argentinian, he's played for Inter Miami, he might actually have a chance to stay.
Yeah, and it just feels like that. It just feels like that's the kind of decision that's going to bite you in the butt later on. Sean says that Messi may want to stay with Taylor because they had a connection. I don't think Messi wants to stay with Taylor. That's just my sort of reading on the situation. What about Drake Callender?
Yeah, I don't think Drake Callender goes. I think he stamped himself as an important player, alternate captain and all that. And I do think he has again, speculation, but I think he has a good relationship with Messi. He's done well enough, unless there's a Argentinian goalkeeper out there that Mascherano has his eye on. I don't see Drake Callender being too affected by this.
I don't know. I could see him wanting to bring in a new center back. A new goalkeeper. I think we're going to get new center backs. I think, we'll see if he wants to play sort of tiki-taka Barcelona style, but if he feels like a guy that they could trade and regret trading later on once they realize how the roster shakes out. I don't think Oscar Ustari is going to be back. I heard some people talk about Ustari being the guy. That's not going to happen. If they get a new goalkeeper, it's going to be someone of a higher quality than Ustari. Yeah. Toto Aviles, I think this is good for him. Yeah, I think David Martinez is going to be back. Federico Redondo and Benjamin Kramaski, I think, are going to benefit from this. Julian Gressel feels like a guy maybe we should talk about. He feels like he's gone.
No, I think he's gone. 100% gone. I think he knows he's gone. He's come out with some really candid interviews, and I really liked the way he spoke in some of the podcasts. And I started to like him as a player. And I'll be honest, I've started to like him. He has some good insights. He's gone. I don't think he stays. Especially after that playoff experience, I think he already has his mind made up. I think he goes. There's no obvious place for him on this team. And he also mentioned in one of the podcasts that he was on recently that he said that I could have actually made a difference coming on. And that's a big thing for a player to state publicly, right? I know the coach is gone and all that, but still. Ugh.
No, it definitely feels like him being on the podcast circuit is him saying something, and it sucks too. I agree with you. I like Julian Gressel. I've liked Julian Gressel for a long time as a player, and I was really happy excited when we got him. But without Tata, and it just didn't feel like he was a part of the team at the very end. And maybe that's just bias for the last 3 games, but I don't know. Here's an interesting one, and maybe we should wrap up this conversation here. A South American player on this team that is not Argentine or Paraguayan. Speaks Spanish, cultural fit, maybe, but does he fit on the roster? And that's Leo Campana.
Aha. I think he stays.
Does being Ecuadorian help or like not help in this situation?
I'm not familiar with the South American dynamics and the politics of that side of the world, but I think he stays. I think Leo Campana stays, but again, it's one to keep an eye out for, because of course he has been in the conversation for being moved on to make more space for some of the other players coming in, but there's a genuine case to be made about how he gels into the team dynamics and how much he's admired by Messi. Again, I think all of these players that we've discussed will definitely have a new lease of life if they have a better influence with Lionel Messi, right? We have to take that into account. So if Leo Campana has a good relationship with Messi, that's automatically going to give him that one leg through the door. So we'll see. One to keep an eye out for. I have a good feeling about him.
Okay, let's have some fun, because we talked about those guys a lot. Let's bring in some new guys. Who's Inter Miami going to go out and get? I just looked up the under-20 team for Argentina, and I just looked up the Olympic team, and there are some fun names on here. That'll be
Alejandro
really cool.
Garnacho.
Well, okay, let's be one step more realistic. Thiago Almada.
Fati.
I don't even. Okay, I don't know what that has to do with anything, because that has nothing to do with Mascherano. He's
Barcelona.
Yeah, but he came after Mascherano. I don't. Yeah. Thiago Almada. He was bought by from Atlanta United, and the plan was for him to spend 1 year in Brazil and then go to France. Yeah. And that club, Lyon, Olympique Lyon, just got relegated to the second division. He may be looking for a place to go next year. Has a relationship with Mascherano. Would love to play with Messi. I would love to see a 10 on this team. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd actually be a good shout.
I don't think that's particularly realistic. Here's another one that I don't think is super realistic, but I think would be fun. And that's Franco Mastantuono, is a 17-year-old type that is supposed to be Real Madrid, Manchester City, Barcelona, Bayern Munich type talent, but he's only 17. You wonder if you could convince him, if Inter Miami is really willing to go out of their way from a financial perspective to spend $25 million on this guy, keep him here for 2 years, and then have him go on to those huge things. This, to me, I think is supposed to be one of the best young prospects in Argentina. Obviously, Mascherano will be familiar with him because of his time with the U20s. Guy who can play as a left winger, right winger, 10. Maybe that's a little too much for Inter Miami, but I don't know. That's just one name I'll throw out there.
No, very good shout for sure. Jorge Mas said that we don't lack the money to spend, so it'll be really interesting to see if they go more of the Federico Redondo direction of actually investing in some of the talents and spending more money on these youngsters. And that's actually a really good shout. I don't know much about him, but a player of that kind, of that ilk, could definitely be someone we could see come in.
Mascherano, positive, negative, how you feeling? We talked about him for an hour. How you feeling about it?
Listen, man, if Yannick Bright gets injured again, at least we may have Mascherano step in into that central defensive midfield role. Yeah, player coach. I'm on the fence. It's going to be a long season. I'm already prepared for all the drama that's going to follow, because with Inter Miami, it's never a straightforward road. This could be an absolute genius decision, a mastermind of a stroke, master stroke, sorry. That's the word. Or this could just completely go south. That was not how I wanted to go into this next season. I wanted us to improve a lot more and just be a lot more stable and not have any question marks about the coaching and not have any question marks about the variables around the club, right? I wanted to talk about the football. And I just feel like with this appointment, there's going to be a lot of question marks outside of the footballing structure of this club. So it could go south very quickly, and we just need to be prepared for it. But as I said at the start of the podcast, whatever happens when he first sits on that bench as Inter Miami coach, I'm going to be behind him. And until he gives me a reason to stop supporting him, I'm going to continue to do so. So it's going to be a wild one.
Yeah, I was just hoping there was some former Barcelona assistant that coached in the second division of Spain, and Raul Sanllehi, he followed him closely because he was at Zaragoza and just was like this up and coming guy that sort of had a connection. Like I was hoping there was a guy like that. Clearly, our chat over the last couple episodes has spoken ill of Mascherano. We'll see how it goes. I'm with you. There's a chance he is a burgeoning superstar. And this is his first club job. And so I'm not going to hold any of his youth national team resume against him. I am excited to see what he brings to the table. Hopefully, we start seeing that in a positive way soon. Our next episode will be on Wednesday night. We'll talk about the roster decisions that have to come on Wednesday, or at least by Wednesday. We'll learn something from that based on what happens in those decisions. And so for me, I'm feeling optimistic, positive. I am not thinking I would rather have Tata Martino for next year. I'm ready to try this. I just want everyone to be clear that the potential pitfalls are very obvious. And if they happen, no one at Inter Miami should look around and say, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. You have to identify it quickly and you have to act quickly. And how much harder is it going to be to fire a guy like Mascherano when he has all these connections if it's not working out? And there's every chance that it's not going to work out. So just like with every coach, I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. I am not pessimistic or feeling doom, but we'll get to find out.
Yeah. Football fans are nothing if not hopeful.
Okay, guys, like I just said, we'll be back on Wednesday. We'll talk about the roster decisions that have to come by then, players coming in, players coming out. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful night. Unfortunately, Orlando City advanced to the semifinals of the MLS Cup. And if they win it all, I'm going to be distraught. But anyways, guys, we'll see you on Wednesday. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.